interest in your government. So we'll talk a little bit about the budget tonight. And this is really for you, so if you have questions, please stop and ask. The board has 6 priorities for the community, and these really guide our budget development. And if you look in the budget document, you'll see how we try to fund different programs with fiscal responsibility, reducing the tax burden, education, public safety, infrastructure, economic development, and service excellence. Just a few common facts about the budget. So our fiscal year, we're on a fiscal year basis, which runs July 1 through June 30th. And that's pretty much, that's across the Commonwealth. Whoa. Okay, do I need to set that down? The county administrator proposes the budget at the first meeting in March. So he'll have a balanced proposed budget that he brings to the Board of Supervisors. After that, we have several board meetings and work sessions where we work on adopting and amending and changing the budget to the needs of the board. And then there's public hearings, and they'll consider things like the taxes, the tax rate, the capital improvement program. So the fiscal year 2018 general fund revenue budget was $286.4 million. So the general fund consists of all of those services that don't have, all those activities that aren't really located in some other place, like doesn't include utilities, it doesn't include transportation fund, but it includes those things that you really kind of, I think generally people consider, fire and rescue and sheriff's department, the commissioner of revenue, the treasurer, all of those kinds of things. And this $286.4 million is a 4% increase over last year's budget. Any questions? Okay. You all had a lot of questions for Laura and Scott, so hopefully you'll have some questions for us too. So if not, our presentation is going to be pretty short. This dollar really represents how we break up the revenues, and this provides support for services. You can see really the largest portion of our revenue goes to local school funding, and then public safety, community development, health and welfare, general government, parks, and a little bit on the end for judicial. That would be like our court services. And this is an all funds chart for fiscal year 2018, and this shows all of the funds that come under the county. So if we look, we have, can you see this at all? All right, I can't see it either. This is a terrible chart. And now we have that on camera, so that's good. We'll remember that for next time for sure. So starting at the top, we have the general fund, general government. So that's what we talked about a little bit before. And then we have school debt service at $31.3 million. Our capital improvement funds, asset forfeiture fund. So asset forfeiture is when the sheriff seizes vehicles or cash or jewelry or those kind of things when there's a drug bust. So they're able to keep some of that money, what is apportioned to them either by the federal government or the state government, and then that has to be used on very specific items. Then we have some special revenue funds. So special revenue, Hidden Lake is a subdivision here in Stafford County that has a dam, and they have a special tax on that, on everybody who lives in that property. And that goes to help maintain that dam. Our tourism fund, that's primarily funded by transient occupancy taxes. So if you come and stay in Stafford, you'll have that tax. Transportation fund is primarily funded by fuel tax. So buy your gas in Stafford, because all that fuel tax stays here then in Stafford. Any questions so far? Yes, ma'am.
And the asset forfeiture, in one of our classes, we were told that is divided in some way between the county and the state. So for the county's portion, what would that go toward? Like, does it go to schools or?
No, it goes specifically to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and to the Sheriff's Department for use in their programs. And I can't really speak very intelligently about all of the things because it's federal money. So it's really there's strict guidelines about it. So, they might not be able to buy recurring supplies like paper and things like that, but.
In general, they did the work and they will get a benefit.
Correct.
In some way from that.
In
Right.
CIP, we have a program for body cameras, and they are planning on using a portion of the asset forfeiture to purchase those cameras. So instead of using cash or bonds or something like that, they would use their asset forfeiture money.
That's a good question. Now we've got the questions started. Yes, sir.
So, do all these funds come from the collection of taxes that we just got the earlier presentation on?
No. So the general government, that's really all your real estate taxes, sales tax, meals tax, consumer utilities tax. There's a portion of transient occupancy tax that goes into the general fund. I said sales tax, I think. Transportation fund, that's where all the fuel tax goes. So any fuel tax that's paid at the pump in Stafford County goes to the transportation fund. There's certain, like Garrisonville Road Service District, because that's a service district, any of those fees associated with that service district go to that fund specifically. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm just wondering who collects, so, my question would be, is the treasurer responsible to collect whatever the source of those funds are? Does everything have to funnel through the treasurer in order to get allocated that way?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I hope I'm not jumping ahead, but
No?
on the budget, what checks and balances do we have in place to make sure a department head does not exceed the budget?
You are jumping ahead, but that's a good question. I like that one. So we do a monthly budget meeting internally where we review all expenditures and we kind of see, okay, we're 1/12 of the year in, 2/12 of the year. We should be at about the same percentage. And if we're not, well, what's that difference? There's also a monthly board report that's in, I believe it's the second board meeting under the county administrator's report that has a budget report in it for the general fund. And it has a breakdown of revenues and expenditures, so you can go out and look at that if you'd like to. So it'll say, the budget and finance department has spent 10% of their operating budget in, the first month. Okay, so why are they above, I think it's about 8% of a year. Why are they above that 8%? And there would be some sort of notation there. So we provide that internally. We do a really close look at that, and then we provide that monthly to the board as well.
And there are some departments that are cyclical, like you have Parks and Rec, who a lot of their payroll is during the summer months when a lot of their programs are going. So you'll see that maybe during the winter months that they don't have a lot of spending, but towards like maybe April, you'll start seeing where that picks up. So sometimes, if you look at the percentage, it won't necessarily match where it should be, where you think it should be. but there's reasons why that is.
And there should be an annotation.
Right,
Mhm.
You look at
Why that-
historical as well.
right,
Right,
or what's happening in that department, yeah.
right.
But we have some type of a fund, so if somebody goes over the budget, you could tap into that fund to get the money?
So every year we have a contingency built into the budget in case that there is some sort of catastrophe. We also, by board policy, have a 12% unassigned fund balance. So whatever 12% of our revenues are going to be, we have to keep that reserved in fund balance. And that changes every year. If revenues go higher, then of course our unassigned fund balance goes higher. So that's reserved, and if a catastrophe happened, something really devastating to the county happened, we could come to the board and ask them to appropriate those funds for us.
But not just because a department is going over, just because. We would question why, and there would have to be a significant reason why.
It would have to be a catastrophe.
Right.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like in the public safety, you could have a situation where if there were riots or something, they had all kinds of overtime they had to pay to, you know.
Right, or if there's
Right.
a lot of snow
Right.
one year.
Right.
You know, our parks department.
So, and a lot of times what we'll do is gather budgets up, things that look like they might be unspent, and help a department that might have had some sort of a situation like that.
Right, from one department to another.
Okay. And y'all only consider with the bottom line of the budget? You're not really concerned with line items within a budget?
Oh, we look at line item by line item. We do in the budget office. So that's part of our job, is to make sure that those lines don't go over budget, and that those revenue lines are coming in at or above budget too, so we want to monitor those revenue lines as well.
We want them to cover their deficits within their budget, so they can move money. If they see that they are running over in one line, they can move it from one line to another. But we want them to cover their deficits within their budget.
Make sense? Okay, good. So budget monitoring, that was a really nice segue. So we do work with departments to help them manage their budget. And when we're building a budget too, and this isn't really in the presentation, so we start with their base operating budget from the prior year, and they tell us their deletions, and they tell us their service additions too, where they want to increase service to the citizens in the county. And that's how we start to build the budget that becomes the proposed budget that the county administrator provides to the board.
Okay, does everyone know what a CIP or capital improvement program is? You can't hold it for me? Does everyone know what a county CIP is? So basically, it is a timeline of when we will do a repair, a replacement, or maybe even new construction. So when we build a fire station, a new school, replace a boiler, or even replace a vehicle. We have just started a vehicle replacement. We, back probably in 2005, when we started reducing budgets and cutting departments, we started making departments keep their vehicles longer, and we stopped replacing them. And we're seeing now that we've got vehicles that are probably 15 years old, and we've started a vehicle replacement this year, and we're trying to get on top of that and trying to get some vehicles replaced. We can replace 2 this year. So it's a start. But anyway, that basically is what a CIP is. It's just a timeline of when we are scheduling replacements or new construction. And why do we need a CIP? Well, it helps the schools and the county identify the community's needs, and it's over a 10-year time frame. So our CIP, and not every county has a 10-year CIP. We have a balanced 10-year CIP. So it identifies our immediate needs and our long-term. And it also helps us with financially. It determines how much debt we can take on, because we don't want to overburden ourselves with debt. So we need to try to limit how much debt we take on. So we have an affordability model that helps us determine how much debt we can take on each year. And we have to stay within that limit. So when we start looking at these projects, we've got to figure out when and how we can fit them in this model and move forward with them. And it also helps us determine the operating costs of these projects, because you build a new fire station or you build a new school, you're taking on a lot of operating costs. And over a time frame of 10 years, we want to see what that cost is going to be for the citizens and for us, because we've got a plan for that in the future. And when you're talking 10 years and you're talking our CIP in FY18 was $303 million. So when you're talking that kind of money and operating costs for those kind of projects, that's a lot of operating costs. So we want to know how much that's going to be. Thank you. So in FY19, this coming year, we have started a new process. And it's called a joint process with the schools. We've always had a joint process with the schools. But this year, it's a little different. What we've done is we've kind of started from scratch. We've formed committees. And the first committee is with school and county staff. We've taken all the projects. We've started from scratch. We wiped the slate clean. We've created a matrix, and we've rated those projects. And the matrix has categories that are kind of based on our goals, the county's goals. And there's criteria in each of those goals. And staff rated those projects, and then how they fell, first through 18 or however many projects we had, is how we fit them in the affordability model. So once we do that, then they'll move on to another committee, which is made up of 3 board members and 3 school board members. They'll take a look at it. They will decide if they feel that any changes need to be made, any tweaks need to be made. They'll bless it, it'll move on, and it'll be sent to the Board of Supervisors to be adopted. But we feel that the process will be more transparent, and it'll offer a more balanced process for the citizens and for the projects. Thank you. So the CIP, it's adopted annually, and the projects can be changed. We put them in, and if things change, the economy changes, the needs of the community change. So if we see that happening and we see that maybe the projects, what we felt 5 years out isn't necessarily what the community needs, the projects could change the following year. So not necessarily what was adopted this year will be adopted next year. Our CIP is probably about 50 pages long. It's a very detailed CIP. This is one of the project sheets. We require everyone to turn in a project sheet that has a program description, operating description. We want to know when the project is going to happen, the cost of the project. We determine the funding source. So when the project comes to us, we decide if we have proffers that we can apply to that project, if we have cash that we can apply to that project. We don't necessarily, we let the department or whoever, or the project manager decide the timing at first because we don't know how it'll fit into the model. But we decide the funding sources. then, and the operating costs. We require them to give us the operating cost. And we also want to see, say the projects, this one right here was for FY17. But maybe in FY20, they thought they would need 2 more people. We want them to put that in that project sheet because we want to see, even after the project was started, we want to see for that 10-year period what that operating cost is going to be. So, anything else that you think of?
I think the CIP is a really good place to go in the budget document, though, if you want to see how your county is going to grow, the things that they're prioritizing for the long term. Because these annual operating budgets, you know, keeping the doors open, keeping the lights on, keeping the sheriffs out, and keeping the fire and rescue folks doing what they do is extremely important to our everyday life. But for our longevity and our long term, there are things that I desired for my community to have. And there are things that you desire for your community to have, and those might not always be the same thing. I might prioritize parks over schools or vice versa. So it's really, if you look in the CIP, it's really going to show you what your community, how your community may change in the next 10 years. And like Donna said, that's always evolving. We're updating it every year. So as the needs of the community changes, as the board's priorities shift, as the school board has different, you know, population of children coming in, it's really important that we keep open to capturing all of that information, adjusting as we go.
So that's
And-
available on the county website.
Yes.
It is. If you go to the county website and scroll to the bottom, there's about 5 buttons. And the second button in is the adopted budget, and you click on it, because I do this all the time, and then you wait. Because it's a really big document.
Right.
It's like 550 pages. And then you wait. And eventually it does load. Don't keep clicking, because I do that all the time. I get
You'll
very
open up 10
impatient.
pages.
I get a little impatient.
It'll take even longer.
Yes.
Yeah, but it is there, and there is a nice table of contents that links to the different sections so you can see. So any of these departments that we have, any of these things that we talked about today are part of that budget document. So you can look, and if you want to say, you know, what is the finance and budget department? What are their personnel costs? And there's a 2-year comparison, is that right? So in the fiscal year 18 budget, fiscal year 17 and 16 were also presented. So you can see, did we go, you know, from $100,000 in personnel costs to $500,000? That's a bit concerning, right? So we should probably kind of keep smoothing those out. You might see incremental changes, small ups and downs, but if there's a large change, and then it would be noted. So sometimes departments do have new folks that they need to hire. The sheriff's department, the fire and rescue, for example, and it does increase their personnel costs. And all of that is noted in the budget document. It is 500 plus pages, so there's a lot of information you can get out of it. But it's really, it is the best document Stafford has. And I'll say that I'm here.
In FY18, the adopted CIP was $563 million. That was all funding sources, cash, proffers, bonds, and the bonds was $303 million. And that included schools, transportation.
So one other thing that we try to do as being fiscally responsible and stewards of the county's money is to enhance our bond rating. The bond rating is just like your FICO or your credit score. The higher your score, the lower that you get to borrow money at. So AAA is the highest credit score from 3 rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Fitch's, and Moody's. Both Standard & Poor's and Fitch's have rated the county as AAA. And this past fall, Moody's upgraded us to 1 notch below AAA. So we're working hard to get there, and this really can be reflective in the interest rates that we're getting for these long-term debts. And when you're talking about a debt for a new school of $35 million over 20 years, you want to get the lowest interest rate possible.
The three groups you sum up, or I think when you sum up out there, what's the difference between the three groups? Maybe the ratings.
Moody's is particular. Moody's is a bit moody.
They just changed their criteria.
And each of them look at things that are just a little bit differently. So some may emphasize your debt ratios. So how much debt do you have to assess value for your real estate property? So that's one measure. They may look at changes over time, your trends, what you're keeping. You asked before about, what do we keep for that, catastrophe that happened, that unassigned fund balance. So, and they also look at what are our financial policies and are we sticking to those? And we do a really good job. The board is very supportive of keeping to their finance policies. So that's really important. I mean, it's just like you at home, if you say, I'm going to save 10% a month until Christmas, and then in July, you go take out half of your savings, you're not going to get to your goal. So.
But if you think you're doing a great job, that's like Moody's, the other two organizations think you're doing a triple A rated job, and Moody's knocks below that. If you think they're wrong, I mean, can you meet with them and appeal your case?
Well, when we go for bonds, we do meet with them, and they're not as quick to move as we would like them to, but we do appeal our case, and that's why they gave us the positive outlook. And when that happens, sometimes after that, if you continue on the same course and you continue with that due diligence and you continue to be good fiscal stewards of dollars, then you can get that increase in ratings.
And part of it is like the area that we're in. And I know that at one time Moody's was concerned about us being so close to Quantico and with the shutting down of some bases. And they were worried that would Quantico ever be one of those bases that would be shut down? Correct. They will never be shut down. But they didn't know that, or they didn't understand that there was so many different organizations there, like the FBI. And so it was just also educating them as to what Quantico was. And I think at one time we did have them come and tour Quantico, and that's how we got the positive rating, the little increase. So again, like Andrea said, it's just baby steps. So maybe next time we'll get another increase.
Part of that happened to be Moody's problem too, because back in 2008, every dog and cat was getting a AAA bond rating, and then when the crash hit, all these investors said, well, wait a minute, you got a Moody's AAA bond rate. So from 2008 until now, Moody's has been brought through a knothole, not to just, now they're going completely the other way. So they've gotten really stringent, marking people in their bond rating, because they took a black eye, giving out, AAA bond ratings to anybody. And so you guys got caught up in that a little bit.
Right, they're very conservative, and
And they're going to take their time.
they're generally the last one to come on the AAA train, so.
Mhm.
So like I said, the FY18 budget is available online. The FY19 will be available after July 1st. And that's our budget office number if you have any questions. And do you have any questions now? Because we still have like 10 more minutes.
Can you move sources of funds around within the budget? So if certain money was supposed to come from proffers, but somebody else needs money, and you have that money in proffers, can you move it from that source to cover the deficiency you have somewhere else within your budget summarily? Or do you have to get approval to take a source of funds from one line to another?
Well, that depends. So some funds are legally restricted, like the proffers. So the proffers can only be in, Mike may talk
Yeah.
about this a little bit, and he'll definitely talk more intelligently. But the proffers may be they're pretty restrictive, so we can't move those too much. But if fire and rescue needs another piece of gear, and we can find that there's budget savings in other departments, we can move that, and, we'll coordinate with that department head, and we'll make sure that we're not just, taking the rest of their budget, but we can coordinate that and move that budget to where it really needs to be. Does that answer your question? Okay, good. Yes, ma'am? Yes. Yes. So, yes, they have, that's Hidden Lake, so there's a special revenue fee for that neighborhood. And that's, if you don't live there, you don't get that. Oh, you have a, no, because that would probably just, S- mhm. Right, so those funds would come into most likely the general fund to cover, and if there's a utilities portion of that, that might go into the utilities fund to cover the cost of providing utilities. Does that make sense? Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? Sir?
So, I like how you all monitor the budget and even monitor budget line items, make sure people don't go over the budget. So I'm trying to figure out, what incentive does a department head have to, save money? So, you say, I'm gonna give you $10 million, and maybe towards the end of the year, they just spend it and just stay right at 10 million, the budget would save them. Maybe the numbers would be really rough. What incentive does the department head have to be more efficient?
Right, so part of the culture in Stafford County government, something that I've seen since I've been here, is that people tend to be fiscally responsible. So that's not just something that we feel in the budget office, that's something that the fire and rescue chief feel, the treasurer and the commissioner of revenue feel. So,
I have been here for 18 years, and just about every department turns in something. I mean, and it's probably gotten less and less the last couple years.
as their budgets get tighter.
As the budgets have gotten really tight, especially since when we had the crash in 2008. But they do not try to spend their budget. You do not see mass spending in April, May, and June. If you look at, if we could show you a spreadsheet, and you would see even spending.
That's good to hear. What I'm trying to get my arms around is, like, if I work for a department head, and I can save money, in the back of my mind, I'd be sort of concerned, well, if they think I didn't need all the money, next budget year, they're gonna cut my budget.
Right, yeah, I can see that. The federal government is really good about doing that, right?
We work for the federal government.
So we don't do that, and we built that sort of trust with departments as well. And also at the end of the year, they might say, well, I'm able to turn in, this pot of money, but my department could really use this piece of equipment. So the Board of Supervisors may reappropriate those funds to them in the next fiscal year after the audit is complete. So they do have an incentive that way, because if they, really kind of save all their pennies, they might be able to get that next piece of equipment or that next thing that increases their service levels. Do you have any other questions?
I think that's an excellent way to run it, because it only, that this
Thank
model
you.
could be copied, in some larger.
Yeah, I have to say, most of this happens at the department level. They really are, they're really responsible with their dollars. We don't see, wasted spending. We're not, there's not red carpets rolled out when I come to work. I don't know why that is.
Or is it?
So, do you have any other questions? Well, thank you so much for your time. Please go out and look at the budget book, and you'll really get to learn so much about your county, the services that we provide. And within each department, they have service levels. So it might be, I can't even think of any now, but how many citizens are served within a fiscal year? How many miles the sheriff's drive, or how many arrests are made, or, there's a lot of different metrics within there that show what our continual work is to improving all of our services that we provide to the citizens of the county. All right, thank you.